Welcome to the Maine Science Podcast. I'm Kate Dickerson. Today's episode is a conversation with Patrick Breeding, who is a co-founder and chief executive officer at Marin Skincare and a co-founder of Dermaris. As far as I'm concerned, Patrick is a great example of both the new and innovative science happening in Maine and a really wonderful representative of the people doing it. I've known Patrick for a couple of years now, and he was gracious enough to present at the Maine Science Festival in 2019. And although I've known Patrick for a while, I still learned a lot from him in our conversation. I especially loved hearing about how he found his inspiration and how much Patrick loves doing his work here in Maine. I'm happy to present Patrick Breeding on the Maine Science Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I would like to know a little bit about your background. I know you have been described as a biotechnology entrepreneur. I've also seen serial entrepreneur, which I think is fascinating for someone who I'm pretty sure is not out of his 20s. So if you could give me a little bit of a background about how you got to Maine and your interest in science, that would be really great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited. How I got to Maine is I grew up in Connecticut. I guess I came to Maine because we vacationed up here. You know, as cheesy as that sounds, we really liked coming up here. It was a different quality of life, and it was a different energy. The people held a different energy, and it had a cool emerging program for bioengineering. I was super interested in pursuing bioengineering, as you know, because when I was in 10th grade, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and that became a real driving force in choosing the type of things that I would pursue and the type of work I wanted to work on. Kind of, you know, as it happened, I was very focused on doing that type of work. And then, you know, as things happen in your life, you kind of get away from it, but you take away the underlying purpose, you know, that you could yield from that experience. And then, so that kind of stayed with me. So I came up to Maine because I liked their bioengineering program. I liked I liked the people, and I liked the place. It's very cool. I like nature. I like connecting with, you know, what the world has to offer, and Maine it's just got so much of it here. So I came up, I was a pretty average student. I was really exploring the world. I've learned a lot about how I was parented and how it did not enable me to explore things. So when I came up to college and I was out of the nest, I just kind of, it was like my eyes were open. So I started to explore the world through the lens of a college student experience. And so I did okay in classes, very, very average, like C and B student. And it wasn't until I got into the research lab that I really came alive for a couple reasons. I was able to go away from weeder courses that are kind of, you know, repetitive in nature, and it's not vanity, but it's learning. In the beginning of learning something, you just repeat it, you learn the next thing, you repeat that. So it sinks in. And so research was the first experience that I could actually look at a real world problem and say, okay, how are people solving this? How could it be solved? Where are the opportunities? And actually go in and investigate the opportunities, which was really cool. And it was that, you know, ability to control and drive the impact that you create, which really attracted me. And I also, for the first time, at least I felt in a really large way for the first time, I was in an environment where I was treated like a competent adult, as funny as that sounds, because in the lab I was in, they kind of let me go, showed me the reins, and then said, go do it. And then I did it, and I didn't overthink it, and we started doing cool things, and I learned how to write grants, which is really another way of communicating a problem, your solution, how you'll do it, why it's important. I learned how to do different types of chemistry and science. I worked in a chemistry lab. And so I built a lot of tools. I built my skill set for communications, project management, leadership, different facets of science, problem solving. And so I brought that to another lab, did a little bit more science, more on the, it was still chemistry, but material science as well. So I finished my undergrad. I did a cool capstone project. So I learned a lot. I found play in work in undergrad, and then I learned how to kind of dance in that. That brought me to graduating and not feeling like I was really ready for the real world. And I think because I wasn't exposed to it very much. So, you know, how could I have been ready for something that I hadn't experienced yet? And I didn't do a good job preparing myself to go out and get a job. But that's okay because I was really into research, so I naturally trickled into grad school. I started a master's degree at the same school under a new faculty member, which was a really interesting experience. Being the first grad student in the lab, I like to build stuff. I like to learn new things, and I learned to toss myself into situations where I didn't know what the hell was going on, but we could figure it out. And that's where a lot of the growth was, and that's a lot of the reason I had so much fun in grad school. So I started this master's program at the same time my capstone project had turned into a startup company, and I took my communication skills, my leadership skills that were very underdeveloped and still are. It's always growing, and I learned how to translate that into, this is what my company's doing. This is the problem that we're solving. This is why we need the grant money, the pitch competition funding, the investor funding, the loan, whatever. This is why we want to put money into this thing, and we're the engineers. We're going to build it. We're going to go out to the customers. We're going to figure out if they like it. We're going to go back and forth and test it until they like it, and then it becomes a product and a business model that works. So that's a lot of that lean startup entrepreneurial stuff that you learn. And then as my company, which was creating a medical simulation app, was evolving, I was taking on cool projects in grad school. I built a microscope. It could do a lot of cool things. It's called a 2-photon microscope. We went out and we tried to figure out projects that we could do with it because it was really the first functional one in Maine. We ended up linking up with the director of the Lobster Institute, which is the impetus for what I'm doing now. And he wanted to originally, I think I told you this, he originally wanted to 3D image and print lobster genitalia for educational purposes, which was quite interesting. We did a little bit of that. We metaphorically banged that project out. And then we got to a point where I was telling him, his name's Bob, why I'm so interested in this field. And, it goes back to my experience with my dad, who at the time, he was going through different battles with cancer. So it was very relevant at that time why I wanted to be in this biomedical engineering field. And Bob happened to say, oh, well, it just so happens I'm looking at this protein that's found in lobsters for all these different anti-cancer, antiviral, anti-inflammatory applications. And so that was the coolest thing to me, is to think like, oh my God, there's something that is so underutilized that he essentially did drug development backwards on and found anecdotal success with real people. Like, he saw it. There's no arguing. You could see before and after pictures. There's no tampering of evidence in it. And then as I started to get to know Bob and his company better, it kept happening. There kept being amazing things happening when they would make skincare products and different products with this protein. So we brought it into the lab. We tried to figure out how it works. We didn't do very well at first. We did some anti-cancer stuff. And then during that time, it's crazy. There's like two parts of I was like living two lives. I was doing the grad school life and then the company life. So my company was growing. We raised, I think, $140K in non-equity diluting funding, which for me was good. For like a 22-year-old guy, that was good, I think. And then I had this cool lobster project going on in the lab, a couple other projects in the lab. And an interesting point that I don't know that I've told you too much about is these things were going. And I was really going. And I was loving it. I was doing really early in the lab till late. I would go across the street from my lab to the Foster Center for Student Innovation at UMaine, and I worked till the middle of the night and try to just get stuff done because I was loving it. It came to a point where both was a lot. And so, a lot of factors started to weigh in on me.
I'm not sure that a whole lot of people know what it means to do engineering research, and myself included. When I don't know if I told you, so I went to an engineering school for undergrad, and I was a sophomore. I was not there as an engineer. I was there as a chemist, and I was a sophomore before I knew what engineering was at that school. And I just remember thinking, oh, that is so cool. I wish I'd known about that before I started. So I know what lab research looks like, and I think a lot of people have in their head, they know what kind of really basic chemistry research looks like because you kind of pretend you're doing that when you do a chemistry lab. But when you're doing biomedical engineering, does that look any different, or is that just another path
That's an interesting question. And I feel like when I was in it, I would have said it's totally different. But I think it's just an amalgam of different things. I think biomedical engineers, even in the nature of the term itself, it's like 3 different roles. It's just being a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And I think what you see in biomedical engineering labs is somebody finding a specific skill set, but using their multifaceted background in chemistry, physics, material science, math, wielding these different skill sets to do projects that are many of those fields combined. And it's not to say that another field couldn't do that type of work. I've just found that the biomedical engineers, they would not only just investigate a biological problem or phenomenon, they would look at the problem, they would deconstruct it with an engineering systems thinking mindset. They would build a lot of what we did at UMaine, at least, was build the tools to understand the problem. Then we would build the solution from the ground up to address the problem. So maybe there's just multiple layers of different fields of research and work going on. And so it's design thinking as well as, a research methodology, scientific approach to do something. So I don't mean to like simplify it down to seem like it's simpler than it is. That's an interesting question.
Oh, I don't think that's simple. It strikes me, the default, science and basic science research, you're not necessarily getting to what does this do for me? What can I do with it? I think I've told you my son he's now a math grad student, and, his whole goal, I think, is to have to do math that maybe someone will figure out in 80 years what to do with. Whereas it sounds like to me, the biomedical engineering in particular, you come across a problem, you back or reverse engineer it almost to try to figure out what's going on, solve the problem, and then figure out how not just to solve the problem, but then to use that for the next step or the next project or the next product. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good way a good way of thinking for a lot of the types of projects. In the next step being, okay, this is a great problem solution fit for this specific problem that you found, but what does it actually look like to implement it in the real world? And so that's where the engineering comes in, which is not just does the pad that I made for a new type of, medical, like anything you find in a hospital that's like crutches, does a pad for the new crutches, does it provide comfort to skin cells, or does it support musculature? Sure. Okay, cool. Now, so how are you going to take it? How are you going to make a film about it? How are you going to wrap that film around the crutch? Does it irritate people over time? What are all the design parameters that go into implementing that solution, not just thinking about the basic research, which is the cool segue into entrepreneurship and cutting out a lot of the excess bullshit of the way too deep into the research, which is not a bad thing. It's just, what's the goal? Is the goal to unlock new and explore new phenomenon and understand at a basic molecular level how this works, or is the goal to address the problem at hand? And neither one's the right answer. It's all about what's the frame of reference and what's the goal. In business and in entrepreneurship, that's what's kind of excited me is you can't just do one part of the step of the value chain. You have to understand how to make understand what's the problem, how to make the product to address it, how to implement it sustainably and scalably so that you can help not one person, but a million people, And so that's what's...
And that is a perfect segue into going back to the lobster research and what you've discovered with the protein. A recent push, at least my experience has been for different science pushes, is to find, like you said, new uses for things that have been right in front of us all the time. So maybe you could just dive into, I will happily just let you run with it, the lobster in particular, and how you moved on from 3D printing genitalia for students to a really cool company.
Yeah. So in the middle of grad school, like I mentioned, I started to work with this company, Bob's company. They saw so many different applications of this protein. And so the one that hit home a lot for us, myself and my partner, Amber, co-founder of the company that we spend most of our time on, is that Amber had horrible eczema, just concentrated on patches all over her face, super red, super angry, dry all the time, and she couldn't find anything to really help it. There's steroids, which are super painful and itchy and cause irritation, and then they often cause more damage than they address. And then there are a lot of moisturizers that just, they don't fit the bill. And so after a little bit of convincing, we made our own version of a skincare product with this protein. And we first, we're scientists and engineers, so we took an approach to it. We patch tested it, which means put it on sensitive parts of your skin to make sure it doesn't irritate you. So we patch tested it over 24 and 48-hour periods a couple times, and then we said, okay, this is safe. Let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work, Oh no. We put it into a skincare base. We selected a concentration.
So what does a skincare base mean?
Oh, so we went online and we Googled skincare products or DIY skincare cosmetic products, and we just chose something that was free from irritants or things that would normally make eczematic skin angry, and we just mixed it in, and so we started applying it, and that's like another thing, like we didn't overthink it, which was wonderful. And we started to apply it to her skin, and within a couple of days, her flare-ups that were visibly noticeable, it looked like she got in a bar fight and she was beat. It looked horrible. And they were completely calmed down. The redness was completely gone. Her skin dryness was down. Her skin was noticeably a lot more smooth. And it started to calm down within a couple days. And then within 2 weeks, her flare-ups were just completely calmed and gone. And so it was miraculous. We started to think about, okay, what do we do with this? And to be honest with you, we didn't do much with it until we hit an inflection point which you know about, which was in the middle of my second year of grad school. My dad passed away on Christmas morning, and the entire process was very difficult. It was all of the emotions. It was almost poetic. We took a step back and really reflected on what we wanted to do after school that really had meaning, because, we really thought about purpose and living a life that was fulfilling and living a life where you were truly living. And that's in terms of work and vocation, it's doing something that's very impactful in other people's lives, because we thought when else and to what higher purpose could we serve than to improve the quality of other people's lives? And what better fulfillment can you get when somebody looks you in the eyes and says, thank you so much. Because of this, I'm no longer insecure. I'm confident again. I feel great. I'm just living a better life. And it was because of the simple thing, that you did or you gave or you sold. And that was a beautiful thing to us. So after that happened, we said, all right, well, we're not giving enough attention to this incredible thing that happened, because when you have eczema, it's annoying. When it's gone, you almost forget you have it, unless it's constant. And so she almost forgot that she had it. And then we, really took a step back and said, all right, this is a huge problem. 10% of the U.S. population has it, and more in other countries. How can we create something that could bring this into people's lives? And so that was the birth of Dermaris, derm being skin, and Aris is Homerus americanus, the suffix from the American lobster. We started to figure out how to build a brand, which it was great to have the previous experience with the medical education startup. I was also involved in a biomechanics, sports performance analysis startup. I learned a lot through those experiences, so I'm really thankful, both of us, that we went through grad school. We learned all the research tools. We learned all the, project management tools. We learned, in our business, the fundraising tools, the communication tools, the managing yourself tools. Still always figuring that one out. And we brought it together to build this skincare company. And so the first way we wanted to bring it into people's lives, we thought about, okay, we have this company that has this super cool ingredient. We have a couple patents around it. This could bring it to people's lives in a couple different ways. We could go to a pharma company and license it. We could try to white label it and make our own products and sell it to Aveeno, whoever. whatever type of large company. But for us, it's a product, or it's a problem that's hits so close to home. And we know the other solutions out there, and we know the exact problems that people suffer from, because we suffered from them too. And when I say we, Amber had eczema, but when you have a partner with eczema, you're in the fight too. So I know a lot of those things too. And so for us, the first vehicle by which we wanted to bring this into people's lives was through our own brand. And so that's when Dermaris launched Marin Skincare, which is our first brand. That's we've been working on our first product for 10 months now. Took a long time. It took a long time to formulate something that felt good, because we didn't want to sacrifice quality. We didn't want to get some like crappy cream out there with our really cool ingredient in there. We got a cream that was super free of anything that was bad and chock full of all of the hydrating and barrier protecting and all of these great skincare ingredients you'd want, and had a really unique texture that feels like, as a lot of these super manly Mainers have described it, mainly men, they put it on their skin and be like, oh, it feels like butter. And so when we got a product that felt like that even they would admit to how good it was, and they'd take an extra little dab and put more on, that's when we know, we had a great product. And it ended up replacing all of Amber's really expensive products from Sephora and Ulta. So anyway, we built a great product, and we spent so much time thinking about the brand, being mindful about what we want to do for people. And it's pretty simple. We want to create gentle and effective skincare products that use our new ingredient in it. And our new ingredient can do a lot of things. So it'll start with one product, and it'll evolve into a line of products, initially for helping people really address their upset skin, and then products that help people just maintain their skin, whether or not they're still in the battle against eczema, psoriasis, whatever it is. Or maybe they've overcome it and they just need something to carry them over, on a day-to-day basis. And so it's an exciting time for us. We were able to get through COVID, start manufacturing, which was a really interesting test for our why, our resilience, our ability to be nimble. We ended up bringing on a co-founder and investor who is exactly who the universe wanted us to bring on. So I'm glad it happened. I'm grateful for it. It was a beautiful challenge. And now we're about to launch. So it's an exciting time for that company.
So the lobster protein, can you say where you find it in the lobster? Is someone going to be, surprised you just take it off the shell, or is it some other part?
It's actually found all throughout their body. It's the primary protein that's found in their body, and we get it from the lobster's circulatory fluid. So it in the lobster is involved in all of these really interesting immune processes. It transports oxygen throughout the lobster's body. It's involved in repair of the barrier of the shell and different layers of tissue when it gets broken. As an example, if it's in a fight with another lobster and they end up chomping on each other with their claws, it is the reason that the lobster doesn't just fill up with water. It actually, helps form a barrier. And so translated over to skincare, it helps your skin retain. It helps your skin form a barrier and reform that healthy skin layer that helps you fight off stuff. And so because it's found in the fluid in the lobster, it's water soluble. And so translate that to skincare, that means it holds on to moisture really, really well. So that's the basic explanation, which is great. We have that understanding now that it's really good at hydrating, it's really good at barrier protecting, and then we're looking into the reduction in inflammation properties as well. And the cool other note to your question on how we get it, we partnered with Luke's Lobster, who's a seafood company over in Saco, and they have we chose them because they're the most ethical and sustainable supply, at least in my opinion, and in many others' eyes, because they've found a way to, before the lobsters become seafood, turn off their nervous system, not kill them, but use electrical impulses to turn off their system so they don't feel anything. So when we take the circulatory fluid, which ends up just going down the drain, it's completely wasted. Nobody's taking advantage of it. We're able to take it in a way that doesn't harm the lobsters, which was a really, really cool thing to be able to do. as people become more conscious, about utilizing the whole animal, treating animals and any source of getting anything in the environment with respect. So we've been able to go in, work with Luke. It's been me going in and getting it myself, which has been really, really cool to see the birth of a new industry, of a new ingredient, of a new thing. It's done in a sustainable and ethical way, which is super great.
Part of me wants to know how you pitched this idea to Luke. Did you cold call him and say, no, really, I have a great idea?
Well, luckily I didn't have to, because of the company that I mentioned, Bob, who was the director of the Lobster Institute. His company had already set that up with Luke. They collaborated with another biological manufacturing company called Lampire Biological Labs, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting up front to go in and set that up. Originally Bob and I were doing it, by hand, and it was taking a long time, but they set up, a process that's repeatable and you can get more people to do it. And so what I'm hoping is that, so Luke was very on board with it. In fact, Luke walked me through the processor, kind of showed me how things work, linked me up with his people who all, by the way, it was really cool, love their jobs. He must be a really great guy to work for, because they wouldn't shut up about how they liked working at Luke's, which was like a really cool thing to see, and it's a really cool thing to see in a partner. But Luke walked me through, and we walked together to the point where he was explaining, well, this is this part of the process that turns off the lobster's nervous system. Why don't we collect it after so that we can do it and not harm them? So Luke's an entrepreneur. He has a really cool story. So he's been just a great partner, and I'm excited to get to a point where it's not me anymore collecting this stuff. I have to hire people, or he hires people, or however it ends up working out to go and collect it, because we're growing with such success. So hopefully we'll get there in the next year. In fact,
what I'm getting out of this is, you have a genuine love for Maine and for being here, which I can relate to on a whole lot of levels. But the other really cool thing I've noticed about living here is if you're enthusiastic about something and you show people that you're serious, it's not very hard to get to people who want to help you out. And it sounds like you've had that same experience as well. And I think that it lends into the myth that I have, that I think is less myth and true, more accurate, that Maine becomes this really great place to try to get some really innovative work done, because if you really want to do it and you find people, they will help you figure out a way to do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you can ask, probably 99% of the younger generation of entrepreneurs in Maine, hey, have you leveraged MTI? Have you done this and that with small business, whatever? And do you know about Greenlight Maine and all these resources? It's actually ridiculous how much there is available. It's ridiculous. Where else, with the exception of a few states that still don't have the same amount of early stage funding mechanisms that we have that are so readily available, can you apply to just get money in exchange for trying to bring your idea into the world? That's a beautiful thing. And, we went through a lot of entrepreneurial programs that got us in front of people that were very powerful. We went through an accelerator program called Scratchpad up in Bangor. We just casually kind of told our business ideas to the entire executive board of Bangor Savings Bank one day for lunch, and then it's just ridiculous the amount of people and systems that are willing to support people like me. I really have a lot of respect for the ecosystem builders, because that is a very delayed gratification line of work, very delayed. And I kind of have a grasp for how delayed and how hard and how long the investment required. I know how much it's costed me in grants, people's time, whatever, to just get me to a point where I launched my first product. But it's gonna start. It already has been paying off, and it's gonna continue, and it's gonna start to really curve up. And I think the people that have been doing this work for a long time are gonna start to really see the fruit from all these trees they've been planting for so long. But it's worth it, and it's beautiful. It's amazing to be able to do it in a state where, like the other day, you can go surfing at 4 a.m., come back, talk to a couple mentors that are just executives in huge companies here that have no problem giving you their time, work remotely because that's how work's going to be, and we're better of a place to do it. And it's a great place to be, especially during like social distancing quarantine area.
Yeah, we could do a lot worse than having had to spend our time here. That's for sure. One of the things I am most excited about watching you go forward and making you talk to people at the Science Festival in coming years is the way you use science and the way you make it explainable and understandable. I think this really cool idea of utilizing things that people have been thrown away, but not just utilizing them like, I wonder, like really diving into how they work. Very cool. I find it super inspiring, and I am deeply grateful that you have decided to let me take up some of your time today and talk about it.
I wish you would have taken up more. I love talking to you.
We can do this again when, actually, why don't we do it again once the manufacturing step is really running, and we can talk about what that's like. We can do the whole deep dive.
That'll be a very different place because there's going to be some really cool, more science going on, different science that will unlock different applications of this for us. And it will really prove to us, investors, our customers, about how versatile this thing is. And it'll be in a different point in my life as well, because I will have exchanged a product in exchange for money, which is something I have really yet to do.
Let me know how that feels. Yeah, let me know how that feels. I've never actually had that experience, so I'm going to live vicariously through you on that one.
It'll be interesting. It's been even an interesting process starting the PR and getting the word out there, planting ourselves in the ground as the people for which this type of thing can happen to, the people that can succeed, and kind of having that identity shift go on, the people that are, able to go out and do all these things. Not a big thing. It was kind of slowly over time, but it was cool to post about what we're doing really for the first time. We've only just talked to people last month and seen the response. It's been great. We have so many people lined up to buy it, and I'm really excited to see how it goes. I'm hoping that our problem will be pushing on the brakes, not the gas. We'll see, but we're ready for either situation, and it would be great to do a podcast when we get there.
I would love to. And I'm always up for talking about all the different things that you're working on.
Thank you so much.
The Maine Science Podcast has received support from the Maine Technology Institute and is recorded at Discovery Studios in Bangor, Maine at the Maine Discovery Museum. The Maine Science Podcast is produced and edited by me, Kate Dickerson. I received production support from Maranda Bouchard, and the Discover Maine theme was composed and performed by Nick Parker.